Okay, hello stream. Hello, and I hope that everything is good and ready for another study session. Okay, so we will be continuing with the study of the Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw's Manual of Insight. And last time we left off, or in the first episode, we learned a lot about morality in regards to especially the four requisites of a bhikkhu, or a monk. Actually, for a monk. That would probably be the more accurate description. Yeah, and we left off right here, and we're going to be starting with this chapter, or the paragraph here on keeping busy doing good. So that's where we are on page 18 in the book. And I think we should start, as always, with the intro of paying homage to the Buddha. So we say, let me just turn to the camera here. And I think the setup is pretty alright. And my mouse is where it should be. So we say, Namo Buddhassa, bhagavato, arahato, samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, and the perfectly self-enlightened one. And I don't think we're going to be doing too much of an intro today. We did a little bit last time. So also make sure that you check out the previous episode. And I have put a link to this playlist below this video, so you can always catch up or watch the whole playlist from the beginning if you so intend or incline. But yeah, with all that said, I think we should get right into some reading here. Okay, so keeping busy doing good. And also, oh hello, welcome to the stream. We have a viewer today, Mudit, one of those very zealous Buddhists who are keen on attending the Dhamma. And so we will mostly just be reading aloud, but if there's something where I might have a comment or something to add, I'll make sure to do that. I'll try not to do it too much, since last time we almost went for 3 hours, which I think it's a little bit too long, but I think it's a good way to really get into this session or series of this study. So anyways, here we go, right into it, page 18. Keeping busy, doing good. One should keep oneself occupied all the time with wholesome deeds, such as learning, teaching, memorizing, reading, scrutinizing, and chanting the Buddhist scriptures, discharging the daily duties of a monk, discussing the Dhamma, only speaking about the Dhamma, giving or listening to the Dhamma talks, and practicing asceticism, utthanga. So like being a recluse in your own little cave or kuti or whatever you have available. Maybe you live in the city and then you run away to the forest and sit under a tree. That is also asceticism, even if it is just for brief periods in a otherwise possibly busy life. When one does so, mental defilements do not have much opportunity to arise, and most of the time wholesome mental states will arise at the six sense doors instead. This is a brief explanation of how to uninterruptedly arouse wholesomeness, steering one's mind toward wholesomeness. One should encourage right attitude, yoniso manasikara, by steering one's mind towards wholesomeness whenever one encounters sense objects. For example, if one is insulted without reason, one should bear in mind any of the following thoughts. He insults me because he is not aware of the truth. Frivolous people often insult others without good reason. That is the way they are. When the truth comes to light, he or she will feel regret. I might have insulted someone in a past life, so now I am suffering the same in return. Insults is part of everyone's life. It is one of the worldly vicissitudes. Now we have a footnote, and we like to read all of the footnotes if we can. So number 44. And it is up here in the top, so okay, so I'm not actually able to read it because it is up here. The 8 worldly vicissitudes are pleasure and pain, gain and loss, fame and disrepute, and praise and blame. So let me just, maybe I could just turn this so it would be easier to read the top ones next time. Hopefully it doesn't look too messy. Even if the Buddha himself was insulted, why not a person like me? The vicissitudes of life usually affects the minds of ordinary people. Only the noble, the Ariyas, can forbear the vicissitudes of life. I will follow their example. The Buddha said that we must be patient even with a person who hacks us into pieces. If we become angry, we would not truly be his disciples. Let me just put away my bookmark. Being insulted is much less painful than being hacked up. Why shouldn't I be able to follow this teaching of the Buddha? The one who insults me is, in an ultimate sense, made up of mental phenomena led by anger and the physical phenomena generated by that angry mental state. There is no person insulting me, but only the 5 aggregates of mental and physical phenomena that have already vanished at the moment of insult. Nama Rupa, mental and physical. And we have the footnote number 45. It's just sliding down a little bit. It says, the 5 aggregates, the khandha, are material form, feelings, perception, sanya, mental formations, and consciousness, vijnana. Okay, continuing on in the same line of thought. They no longer exist. Now there is nothing to be angry with. If I remain angry, that would involve being angry with the subsequent phenomena, which would be similar to a person who hates the parents, but takes revenge on their children or grandchildren after the parents have passed away. The 5 aggregates, and continuing on with the next stanza here, the 5 aggregates of mental and physical phenomena were only there while I was being insulted, and they have also already vanished. So if I remain angry with the subsequently arisen mental and physical phenomena, it would be like trying to take revenge when the children, grandchildren, or great-grandchildren are there, but the parents are no longer living. There are many other ways of thinking, too, that will encourage a right attitude. Whichever way one steers one's mind toward wholesomeness is honored as a right attitude. This is a brief explanation of how purification by means of right attitude comes about. Attaining the three kinds of restraint. By employing the means described above, only wholesome mental states arise at the six sense doors, and one therefore attains morality by means of restraining the senses. Practicing in this way, whenever there is contact with the six sense objects, wholesome awareness prevails, and one therefore attains restraint by means of mindfulness. If unwholesome thoughts should arise from time to time, one should make up one's mind not to think of them again. One also fulfills restraint of the senses in this way. Moreover, when one encounters unpleasant sense objects, one is able to be patient with them, which is restraint by means of forbearance. When one makes a great effort to prevent the arising of mental defilements, such as thoughts of sensual pleasure, or makes a great effort to ensure that unwholesome thoughts disappear, this is restraint by means of effort. Vidya. In addition, one can restore one's morality by means of restraint of the senses in the same way as one restores one's morality by confessing one's offense to a fellow monk and promising not to commit it again. Restraint that comes from meditation. The means of fulfilling morality by means of restraining the senses, as mentioned above, may sound easy, but in practice it is not. The mind is very disobedient unless it is tamed through meditation. It often goes to sense objects against one's wish or determination. This is how the mind is useless. This is how the mind is unless it is tamed by means of meditation. Some people have the notion that morality by means of restraining the senses can be attained without or before practicing meditation. They assume that one should meditate only after having attained all four types of morality. However, we should consider the instruction emphasized by the commentaries and sub-commentaries that the mind should just be with the seeing and so on, and let absolutely no defilements arise at the six sense doors. So, the idea that one should only meditate after having attained all four types of morality, that would be kind of impossible, since real morality is a thing of the mind, So if you never use your mind to look at your own mind, you can never really attain any true degree of morality. Who can do that? Who can do that every time sense objects strike any of the six sense doors and produce the six sense consciousnesses? So here we have the reference to the six senses, which is really just, plainly said, the five senses that most Western people know of, and then including the sense of thought. So thinking in Buddhism is also a sense. So therefore it is the six senses. No one can do that, not even a very mature insight meditator. Let me just read again here. On restraining the senses at the six sense doors. Who can do that every time a sense object strike any of the six sense doors and produce the six sense consciousnesses? No one can do that, not even a very mature insight meditator. The defilements to be overcome by means of restraining the senses are not the ones that result in verbal or physical transgressions that can be overcome by means of morality. They are the obsessive and dormant defilements that can only be rooted out by means of concentration, samadhi, and wisdom, panya. Restraint of the senses is not really morality in the same sense as the morality of observing the monastic precepts. The mindfulness, wisdom, forbearance, and effort that characterize restraint of the senses actually belong to the training of concentration and wisdom, not to the training of morality. That is why restraint by means of wisdom refers to path knowledge as shown in the Chula Nidesa and in the commentary to the Sutta Nipata. The evidence proves that restraint of the senses cannot be fully purified without or before meditation. The mind tamed by means of meditation becomes gentle, obedient. It follows one's wishes, and one can direct it to any object one wants. That is the way it is. Therefore, restraint of the senses can only be fully purified by means of meditation. The more one's meditation matures, the purer one's restraint of the senses becomes. When one's meditation is fully mature, this kind of morality will be fully purified, as explained in the commentaries and subcommentaries. To illustrate this point, the Visuddhimagga encourages us to follow the example of a senior monk called Mahasi. Venerable Mahasi was a senior bhikkhu who had been practicing the contemplation of the impurity of the body, asubha for years. One day he saw a woman smiling alluringly at him somewhere in the forest. Far from yielding to temptation, the sight of her teeth caused the perception of impurity, vipassanā, to arise in him, which led him to attain the first jhana. He then proceeded to practice insight meditation based on that very jhana until he attained the fruit of arahantship, arahatta pala. So this monk had been practicing contemplation of the loathsomeness of the body, asubha, cultivating the perception of loathsomeness or impurity of the body. And as he then saw the teeth of a young woman who smiled to him, that then was kind of a prompt for him to attain the jhana, seeing the first jhana, seeing the mental and physical phenomena as they are. And then, as he saw that he had attained the first jhana, he proceeded to practice insight meditation based on that very jhana until he attained the fruit of arahatship. Amazing. The Visuddhimagga records this verse, composed by an old sage. He saw the bones that were her teeth, and kept in mind his first perception, and standing on that very spot, the elder became an arahant. And I think we have the Pali for that as well. Yes? From the path of purification. Tassa dantatikang diswa vipassanā anusare tatewa so tito tero arahatang appapuniti. Oh. The phrase, keeping in mind his first perception of impurity, makes it clear that the monk had already developed well the contemplation of the impurity of the body before this event. So if one wants to follow the example of this monk, one needs to develop well one's meditation beforehand. Otherwise, one's meditation cannot be applied like this monk's to resist temptation. One may ask, so in the culture of, well, for someone who's strictly practicing for the attainment of enlightenment, and also maybe in some Asian cultures, so if a woman smiles with her teeth, that is kind of like maybe she's flirting a little bit. Just to kind of put it into perspective for maybe some Western people who don't really connect those things as such. Like, for example, seeing the teeth of a young woman as something that is tempting. That's what I mean. One may ask, isn't it possible for a person with well-developed noble deeds, parami, perfections? Let's see what the footnote says. Oh no, I have to do this again. Put it up there. Parami. There are 10 perfections or forces of purity in Theravada Buddhism. 1. Generosity. 2. Morality. 3. Renunciation. 4. Wisdom. 5. Energy, patience, truthfulness, resolution, loving kindness, and 10. Equanimity. To apply this reflection of impurity, even if they had not practiced it beforehand. Okay, so let me just read it again right from here. One may ask, isn't it possible for a person with well-developed noble deeds, parami, to apply this reflection of impurity, even if they have not practiced it beforehand? That is possible, of course. The contemplation of the impurity of the body is a kind of meditation. Thus, it is clear that restraint of the senses cannot be fully purified without meditation, in view of what the commentary and sub-commentary clearly say regarding this type of morality. One should not let any mental defilement come in through the 6 sense doors. So also for the purpose of study and really getting into the Dhamma and trying to really understand and see this loathsomeness for ourselves, even in our practice, we might add that something which is loathsome and very off-putting and actually kind of in a meditative sense disgusting is the 3 characteristics, which are impermanence and non-self and suffering. Anicca, anatta, and dukkha. So these 3 characteristics. So if we think about, maybe we sometimes see something which is desirable. So we should also think that our mind is desiring something which is ultimately impermanent, which we cannot control. It is uncontrollable or non-self. and it is a cause for suffering, because when we lose it, or when we stress about obtaining it, we make ourselves suffer. So anything which is in this category or still belonging to samsara, if our mind inclines towards and seeks out such objects of, for example, beautiful sights, then we should think that our mind inclines towards samsara. And it's a good way to remind ourselves that if that happens, we have still something to do in our meditation practice. So for example, nibbana, which does not arise, that is not subject to the three characteristics. So it is not impermanent, it is not anatta, it is not non-self, and it is not suffering. And I can't really go really deep into that right now, because it is kind of, if you're not enlightened yourself, to think about nibbana, it can actually cause you stress and suffering, or cause one stress and suffering, and even confusion. So I just want to say that in relation to sense objects like beautiful sights or maybe thoughts, we can try and see for ourselves that they are impermanent, and we can understand this on a more conventional level. Impermanent, they are non-self, uncontrollable, and they are a cause for suffering. Okay. If one wants to purify restraint of the senses before having practiced meditation, one should follow the above-mentioned methods as much as possible. But if one wants to fully purify it, one must practice meditation. 1. Should not delay one's meditation practice out of concern that one's restraint of the senses is not yet fully purified. Meditation will enable one to accomplish all kinds of restraint, including restraint of the senses. Restraint as a prerequisite for meditation. Also morality and even generosity, all of the 10 paramis, perfections. If someone has practiced this before coming to know about vipassanā meditation, they really support one's practice and makes it easy for the mind to understand and receive the Dhamma. So if you are, for example, in the opposite, if you are very immoral, or let's say if you're, maybe you have lied or stolen or maybe killed, then the meditation practice can actually be quite painful. So such things as morality, as restraint is a kind of morality, they really help as a preliminary practice for meditation. But anyone could take up meditation, even if they have not practiced the paramis. But most of us have done good things, and also bad things. So hopefully we have done more good things and bad things in our life, so our meditation will be beautiful and fruitful. In brief, it is only necessary for monks to fulfill 2 kinds of morality as prerequisites for the practice of meditation. They must observe the monastic precepts that are rules and regulations concerned with physical and verbal behavior, and the monastic precepts that are rules and regulations associated with livelihood. Violating violation of these two kinds of morality constitutes a threat to the monk's prospects for path knowledge and fruition knowledge. Anya vitikamanta Ariya vitikamantarya Anya vitikamantarya. I haven't read that word before. Anya. Okay. Fulfilling the observation of monastic precepts automatically purifies the morality of pursuing pure livelihood. So let's just give some basic precepts for Buddhists, for example. And it is 1, the undertaking the training rule not to kill, and not to steal, and not to lie, and not to commit adultery or cheat if you have a partner, or sexual misconduct such as abuse, and not to take drugs and alcohol in such a degree that it leads you to carelessness. So maybe you, if you get sick, maybe you take some medicine or something. You should be wary that it does not take away your mindfulness, or in case with alcohol as well, drugs, of course. We should all not take alcohol and drugs. I think today I often read that related to the observance days, uposadas, they in Buddhist cultures describe it as strong drink. So you can take that as you may. Fulfilling the observation of monastic precepts automatically purifies the morality of pursuing a pure livelihood. If a monk pursues wrong livelihood, he also spoils his observation of monastic precepts. So in order to fulfill the observation of monastic precepts, a monk necessarily must avoid pursuing wrong livelihood. Before taking up meditation practice, a monk should also try his best to attain restraint of the senses, and to always keep in mind the purpose for using the 4 requisites, if possible. When one fulfills these 2 kinds of morality, one is free from regret or remorse. But failure to fulfill them will not harm one's practice. So do not hesitate to practice for that reason. Always practice meditation, because it purifies the mind. So in the future it will be strong enough to restrain itself from these wrong kinds of livelihood. All 4 kinds of morality will be fulfilled automatically when one practices meditation. This will become clearer at the end of the section on moral conduct for the laity. The purification of conduct for the laity. The practice of morality is not as exhaustive for lay people as it is for monks. The purposes of lay people are served by either the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts, topped with right livelihood. Ajivatamma ka sila. Ajivatamaka sila. One may wonder how these 2 forms of morality can serve equally well when some of their precepts differ. It is because their do's and don'ts are fundamentally the same. So if one observes the 5 precepts, and probably follows the precept of refraining from lying by inference, one also observes the 3 additional verbal precepts included in the 8 precepts, topped with right livelihood. Namely, refraining from backbiting or slander, pisunya vacha, harsh or insulting words, parusa vacha, and frivolous speech, sampa palapavacha. Likewise, if one refrains from the 3 bodily misbehaviors and the 4 verbal offenses, then one's livelihood is automatically pure, as is required by the 8 precepts topped with right livelihood. Thus, proper observance of the 5 precepts is basically the same as proper observance of the 8 precepts topped with right livelihood. On the other hand, if one observes the 8 precepts topped with right livelihood, by inference one is also supposed to refrain from alcoholic drink and any illegal drugs. These behaviors are considered indulgence in sensual pleasure and are therefore included in the precept concerning sexual misconduct. Thus, proper observance of the 8 precepts topped with right livelihood is basically the same as the 5 precepts. So whether one keeps one or the other of these 2 kinds of morality, it amounts to purification of conduct. So if I remember right, the 8 precepts are not to sleep on high bedding, and not to watch shows or entertainment, and not to eat after noon. That makes the 8 precepts, as far as I remember. The 5 precepts are universal and exist whether or not the Buddha's teaching exists. They apply equally to all human societies, regardless of time or place. To break the 5 precepts necessarily constitutes an offense, while observing them necessarily creates merit. That is simply the way it is. It is not something that was decided by the Buddha. So this we can also relate to the law of kamma, which the Buddha did not invent, but the Buddha, the Sammasambuddha, understands the law of kamma, which means the Buddha can see beings appear and in their birth when they die from one place and they appear in another place, and the Buddha can see the direction of beings where they are headed for the next rebirth. And the Buddha understands causes and their effects. So the Buddha didn't actually create or make this law, it's just how kind of reality itself works. So whether or not you are a Buddhist, if you go around killing or lying or stealing and so forth, that is automatically bad. It doesn't matter what religion or culture you have. It is just part of the condition of being born into samsara. So the law of kamma governs all beings, whether or not they know about the Buddha or not. And in most cultures, even if they're not Buddhists, killing and stealing and lying is almost always seen as bad. In some religions, I believe it is okay to lie to some people or steal and kill people which are not of your own religion, but that is a wrong view, and a very dangerous wrong view. But apparently, in some cases, some religions do uphold such rules, which is wrong. Because killing beings of another religion, there's no protection for you or for someone who does that, as in accordance with the law of kamma. So it doesn't really matter who you pray to, if you still run around breaking these 5 universal precepts of purity. Anyway, so you could say that maybe lying or not being outright straightforward in business, that, that could be a little bit different, because in business it is kind of the whole idea is to, if you're selling stuff, for example, you always say that, or most times you say that this stuff is the best stuff, but maybe you already know that next year there comes something that is even better, but it has not come out yet. So you can say that it is the best stuff, and then you just say that, but it is only true of right now, for example. But next year it's not going to be the best stuff. So that's not really, I don't want to get too much into it, but it's not really, that's kind of business morality, and it's kind of, you take the good with the bad. So don't worry too much about such things, unless you're outright lying. Then it is always bad to lie. If you're saying something is true while it is not true, or not even closely to being true, that's a lie, which is always bad. Comparisons to monastic morality. In regard to both the 5 precepts and the 8 precepts topped with right livelihood, refraining from the 3 bodily misdeeds and the 4 verbal offences that are not connected with one's livelihood are considered to be the lay form of observing monastic precepts. When connected with one's livelihood, refraining from the 3 bodily misdeeds and 4 verbal offences can be considered the lay form of morality of pursuing a pure livelihood. There is a difference, however, between a lay person and a monk's observance of the 8 precepts, topped with right livelihood. It is an offense for a monk not only when he seeks the 4 requisites in ways not approved by the code of monastic rules, but also every time he uses the requisites gained in those ways. This is only a violation of right livelihood for lay people. However, while they are committing bodily or verbal acts that are transgressions concerned with their livelihood, it is not an offense for them when they use materials they have improbably sought. This is because use alone does not involve committing any bodily or verbal misdeed, such as killing, stealing, lying, etc. Using materials improbably sought is not a violation of a rule established by the Buddha for lay people, as it is for monks. So, for example, when monks go on alms round, they're really only allowed to stand outside the door or the house to indicate that they are there or receiving alms or food from anyone who might feel like giving on that day. But if they go and knock on the door and say, "Please give me food," that is a wrong way to get food. So even if they get food, when they then eat it, because they have a monk has, in such a case, has gotten it in the wrong way, then every time they eat from it, that would be also wrong. So this is what the Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw is pointing out here. So it is not absolutely necessary that a lay person relinquish what he has obtained by unethical means. Simply making the determination not to continue indulging in wrong livelihood can purify a lay person's livelihood. And you can also say, for example, gambling is wrong. So if a lay person gambles and maybe wins a lot of money, they can still use that money without breaking right livelihood, as long as they also make a determination to then stop gambling, for example. Keeping in mind the purpose for using the 4 requisites pertains only to monks. Lay people may use the requisites without considering their proper purpose. However, lay people too may certainly enjoy the benefits of this kind of morality, thereby increasing merit and decreasing demerit. Restraint of the senses, as explained above, is difficult to fulfill prior to practicing meditation, even for monks, not to mention lay people. In any event, the practice of meditation fulfills all 4 kinds of morality. This will be clarified later. There is no basis in the Pali texts for the idea that these 4 kinds of morality should be purified for many days, months, or even years prior to taking up meditation. For monks, breaking the monastic rules interferes with their prospects for enlightenment. Therefore, for them, this morality must be purified before starting meditation. For example, giving up everything and leaving it behind when you become a monk. So you don't have a house or anything when you're a monk. You have given that away, maybe to your family or someone. And if you're not going to be a monk forever, maybe you give it to someone who can look after it while you are a monk. And then when you're not a monk anymore, then you can possibly get it back. However, none of the texts mention how long a monk must purify his morality before beginning to practice. So a monk can begin to practice the minute he fulfills the monastic precepts. This is also true of the moral precepts for lay people. One can attain concentration, insight knowledge, path, and fruition at the moment one's perfections are well enough developed. The 5 spiritual obstacles. For lay people, even if they have violated the precepts before, there is no barrier to path knowledge and fruition knowledge unless one or more of the 5 obstacles to the path knowledge and fruition knowledge hinders them. If they are hindered by any of the obstacles to path knowledge and fruition knowledge, then both lay people and monks cannot attain path knowledge and fruition knowledge in this life. I will describe these obstacles here. Kamma. Kamma obstacles. Kammantarya refers to the 5 fatal types of misconduct. Killing one's own mother, killing one's own father, killing an Arahant, injuring the Buddha, and disrupting the unity of the monastic community. This last one is only for monks. The 5 deeds necessarily lead one to the lower world immediately after death, so we also talked about this in the previous episode. But here, Mahasi goes into detail. They jeopardize one's prospects for celestial birth and for path knowledge and fruition knowledge. Thus, they are called intentional acts that have immediate results. Anantarya kamma. Raping a virtuous nun is called bhikkhuni dusana kamma and jeopardizes the prospect for path knowledge and fruition knowledge. These 6 kinds of deeds are called kammic obstacles. Wrong views. Defilement obstacles. Kilesa. I have a little bit of trouble because there's the T in here, and I just wanted to say kilesa anardya, but it is actually kilesantarya. Okay, defilement obstacles, kilesantarya, refers to 3 types of wrong views. The wrong view that there is no good or evil, akirya ditti. The idea that actions do not become good or evil and do not lead to good or evil results. The wrong view that everything is cut off or comes to an end when a being dies. Nattika ditti. The idea that no further existence will occur after death, that there are no good or evil results that come from good or evil actions, and the wrong view that volitional action does not produce good or evil results. Ahittuka ditti. The idea that happiness and suffering arise by themselves without causes. These are the two extreme views. The extreme view of nihilism, where you don't believe that there are anything after death, and the extreme view that there's no result of doing good or evil. So maybe you believe in some kind of a atta or soul, and as long as you believe in a soul, you can do whatever you want. You can rape and kill and steal and plunder and everything you want as long as you believe in a soul. That and nihilism, believing no matter what you do after death, there's nothing. So these are the two kinds of extreme views. Okay, there's three views here. No good or evil, no further existence. Oh, okay. And then the third view here is the idea that happiness and suffering arise by themselves without causes. So, for example, there is no... this is the belief that all beings are equal, that beings are not born in accordance to the kamma, which for most people we can't understand kamma anyway. But it is still a view or a belief when you say that all beings are equal and some people are born different out of pure randomness or luck or unluck. So that is also an evil view. Of these three views, the first denies that effects have causes, the second denies that causes have effect, and the third denies both. So the three kinds of wrong view deny the law of cause and effect. If one holds steadfastly to any of these three types of wrong view, they are said to have steadfast wrong views, niyatta micca ditti, and are bound to be reborn in a lower world immediately after death. Thus, these views are an obstacle to celestial rebirth and path knowledge and fruition knowledge. Inborn deficiency. Obstacle of inborn deficiency. Vipāka. Here's the T thing again. Vipākantarya. Refers to an inborn deficiency in spiritual intellect called ahetuka or dvihetuka. However, this is an obstacle only to path knowledge and fruition knowledge, not to celestial rebirth. So a layperson with this obstacle can be reborn into the divine realm if he or she performs good deeds. Insulting a noble one, with a footnote number 48. A noble one, Ariya, is someone who has attained any stage of enlightenment. Obstacle of insulting a noble one, Ariyo pawadantarya, refers to the act of insulting or degrading a noble one, with or without knowledge of his or her virtues. It damages the prospect of both celestial rebirth and path knowledge and fruition knowledge. One can remove this obstacle, however, by apologizing to the noble one, the Ariya, for the offense. Knowingly violating the monastic code. obstacle of knowingly violating the monastic code, Anya Viti Kamantarya, refers to a monk's knowing violation of the code of monastic rules that are sorted into 7 groups. It harms the prospects for a celestial birth and path knowledge and fruition knowledge. A monk can be freed from this obstacle if he atones for his offense according to regulations in the monastic code. The Majjhima Nikaya commentary says that the violation of the monastic code is only an obstacle so long as the monk who has committed an offense meriting expulsion continues to live as a monk, or as long as a monk who has committed a minor offense does not probably atone for it. However, if the monk disrobes or atones for his offense, as dictated by the code of monastic rules, it is no longer an obstacle. The enlightenment of immoral lay people. Given the above discussion of the 5 spiritual obstacles, we can conclude that for the most part moral violations by lay people do not cause obstacles to enlightenment, except the 6 major ones: killing your mother, father, Arahant, injuring a Buddha, and raping a bhikkhuni. This is supported by the stories of 4 immoral lay people who became enlightened: the drunken minister named Santari, a fisherman named Ariya, a pickpocket, a man of royal caste named Sarakani. The story of Minister Santati's enlightenment. King Kosala was once so pleased with his minister Santati's success in conquering an enemy that he conferred 7-day kinghood on him as a reward. The minister spent his regal week enjoying kingly life and getting drunk all the time. On the 7th day he departed the palace for the river, accompanied by many royal attendants. When he met the Buddha on the way, he paid respects to him from his seat on the back of a royal elephant by nodding his head. The Buddha then predicted that on that very day minister would become fully enlightened after having listened to a single verse, and then would enter Parinibbana. A fully enlightened being enters Parinibbana when the body passes away. Hearing this prediction, some unbelievers sneered at the Buddha, saying that it would be impossible for a drunkard to become fully enlightened on the same day. They were sure Gautama Buddha would be humiliated by his misstatement. That evening, however, the beautiful girl whom the minister adored most among the court ladies died under his very nose while entertaining him. He was so grief-stricken that he could find no way to console himself. He finally went to the Buddha looking for relief from his great sorrow. The Buddha spoke the following verse: Let past defilements wither away. Do not yield to fortune. Do not yield to future passions. Do not grasp at the present. Then the fires of defilement will be extinguished. Yang pupetang vesosehi pachyate mahu kinchanang macche jeno gahisatsi upasanto charisasi. The Dhammapada Atthakavata says that the minister became an Arahant after hearing the verse above. He then flew to the height of about 7 palm trees, as directed by the Buddha in order to dispel anyone's doubt about his enlightenment. Afterwards, he entered parinibbana as a layman. The fact that the minister became an arahant after listening to just this one verse should not be taken to mean that simply listening to the Dhamma talk without practicing meditation can bring enlightenment. As the minister was listening to that verse of Dhamma, he was observing his mind and body. This brought about the insight knowledge and attainment of path knowledge and fruition knowledge step by step until he became fully enlightened. That is, he passed through the stages of becoming a stream enterer, once returner, a non-returner, and an arahant as he sat listening. The commentary to the Satipatthana Sutta explains this as follows. Although enlightenment may occur after listening to a talk, it is impossible to bring about any insight or enlightenment without meditating on body, feelings, consciousness, and mental objects, so they i.e. immoral lay people such as Minister Santati, the woman called Patachari. So they overcame sorrow and lamentation by taking this very path of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the Satipatthana. And here we have the Pali for what I just read. Yasma Pana Kaya Vedana Chitta Dhammesu Kanchi Dhammang Annamasitva Bhavana Nama Natti Tasmatepi Iminawe Makkena Sukkapari Deve Sammatikantati Veditapa. Since the minister was drunk for the entire week before hearing this verse from the Buddha, it is clear that his morality was not purified until immediately before his enlightenment. So he must have kind of sobered up. Maybe it was the dancer or entertainer girl's death that made him sober up. The simple fact that he was in his final life, so that since he became an arahant, he wasn't reborn. Final life, Pachima Bhavika, cannot explain this case. If he had been a monk, his violation of the monastic rules would have been an obstacle to his enlightenment, even though he was in his final life. The guideline given to the monk Uttaya, who was also in his final life, supports this. So, Uttaya, purify the very starting point of wholesome states. And what is the very starting point of wholesome states? Morality that is well purified, and view that is straight. 54 and 55. Observing monastic precepts, a correct view of kamma. View that is straight. Then Uttaya, when your morality is well purified and your view is straight, based on morality, established in morality, you should develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness. 56. The connected discourses of the Buddha, Samyutta Nikaya. And we have the Pali here. Tasmatiha twang Uttaya Atimewa Visudehi Kusalesu Dhammesu Ko Jati Kusalanang Dhammanang Silancha Suvisuddhang Vitti cha Ujjaka Yato cha Kote Uttya Silancha Suvisuddhang Vavisati Ditti cha Ujjaka Tato Twang Tvam Uttya Silang Nisaya Sile Patitaya Chittaro Satipatthane Paveyasi. Let me just pick up my footnote bookmark here as I turn the page. Oh. Okay. That was a beautiful verse. I interpret morality here as observing the monastic code according to the Jhana Vipāka and the Kanka sub-commentary. Note that although the Buddha gave the guideline to practice meditation after having fulfilled morality, he did not mention how long the morality should be purified in advance. Moreover, he prescribed the practice of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but he did not specify developing only one of these 4 foundations, nor did he specify the order of developing the 4. In other words, one may develop any of the 4 kinds of mindfulness. Venerable Uttya, practicing as instructed, soon became an arahant. So, clearly he was in his final life. Nevertheless, he was still instructed to fulfill morality before beginning his meditation practice. Therefore, it must be necessary for a monk to fulfill the morality of observing monastic precepts, whether he is in his final life or not. Since a moral violation is necessarily an obstacle to a monk's enlightenment, Uttya was instructed to keep away from steadfast wrong views for a similar reason. Given these 2 cases and their outcomes, it is evident that even in one's last life, moral violations are an obstacle to path knowledge and fruition knowledge for a monk but not a lay person. Therefore, one should not say that one can attain path knowledge and fruition knowledge without having purified one's morality beforehand, just because it is one's final life. The story of fisherman Ariya's enlightenment. One day, the Buddha returned after having collected alms food from a village near the northern gate of Savatthi. He chose his route so that on the way he would meet with a fisherman by the name Ariya, which means noble one. Seeing the Buddha coming, accompanied by his bhikkhus, Ariya put down his fishing pole and stood up to one side. When asked his name, he replied, Ariya. A person who hurts or kills other living beings is not called Ariya, said the Buddha. A real Ariya does not behave in such a way. Then the Buddha concluded the conversation with the following verse: not harming living beings is one a noble one. By being harmless to all living beings is one called a noble one. And the Pali from the Dhammapada: Natena Aryo Hoti Yena Panani Pangani Yena Pangani Himsati Ahimsa Sapapanang Aryo Tipavujjati. Ahimsa, That means harmless. That's a good word. It's a good Pali word to remember. Ahimsa. While himsa, himsati, or himsa, means harming. Ahimsa means non-harming or harmlessness. The commentary to the Dhammapada says that after hearing this talk, the fisherman Ariya became a stream enterer. The story of the thief's enlightenment. One day, while the Buddha was giving a Dhamma talk in the Jetavana monastery, 2 pickpockets were in the audience. One of them listened carefully to the talk and became a stream enterer on the spot. The other proudly stole 5 coins. Afterwards, at home, he laughed at his friend, saying, "You are so wise that you couldn't even get anything for your meal." The newly reformed thief, who had become a noble one, reflected like this: out of ignorance, he thinks of himself as a good and wise person. He reported this to the Buddha, who uttered the following verse: "A fool conscious of her foolishness is to that extent wise, but a fool who considers himself wise is the one to be called a fool." '58 from the Dhammapada. Yo balo manyati balyang pandito wapi tenaso balo cha panditamani sawe balo tibuchati. If a fool knows that he or she knows nothing, he or she may approach a wise person and, listening to the wise person's admonition, become wise him or herself. A true fool is a person who knows nothing but thinks of himself or herself as being very wise, thinking that nobody else is as wise as oneself. One does not listen to any other person's advice, and so remains a fool for the rest of one's life. The story of Sarakani's enlightenment. Following the death of Sarakani, a man of the Buddha's royal family, the Buddha claimed... a man of the Buddha's royal family, Sarakani, the Buddha claimed that the nobleman had become a stream enterer and was safe from rebirth in the lower realms. However, other members of the royal family disparaged the Buddha for his pronouncement, saying around the court, "It is wonderful indeed, sir. It is amazing indeed, sir. Now, who here won't be a stream enterer when the Blessed One has declared Sarakani the Sakyan after he died to be a stream enterer, no longer bound to the netherworld, fixed in destiny, with enlightenment as his destination." Sarakani the Sakyan was too weak for the training. He drank intoxicating drink. I don't know if we're going to read the Pali of this. No, I don't think so. Disparaging the Buddha in Pali. We don't need to do that. The Buddha's cousin Mahanama reported this gossip to the Buddha. Out of compassion, the Buddha then explained the reason why Sarakani had become a stream enterer. The Buddha's explanation can be found in the Sarakani Vaka of the Suttapati Samyutta in the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses. The Buddha gave the example of a seed. A rotten seed in poor soil will certainly not grow well. In the same way, practice that uses the wrong method will certainly not lead to enlightenment. On the other hand, a good seed in fertile soil grows well. Likewise, practicing under the Buddha's guidance, one is bound to obtain path, fruition, and nibbana. The Buddha concluded his explanation as follows. How much more than Sadakani the second, Mahanama, Sadakani the second undertook the training at the time of his death. So, but just in his last thought, he undertook the training. And here's the Pali. Kimangang pana saranganim nim sakkang sakkam sarangani maha nama sakko maranakale marangakale sikaya paripurakare ahositi. So it is clear that Sadakani had not previously purified morality. Only shortly before his death did he fulfill his morality and become a stream enterer. So I think we might end it right here, with the next part here being called like this: how different types of people are suited to different trainings. Since this is kind of a little bit of a change in the pace or change in the topic, I think it's a good time for us to end this episode here. And also remember not to just to, if you're watching these videos, not just to watch them all without taking some time to let them kind of sink in, so you receive the Dhamma in a proper way. So that is also one good reason to end this episode here. Also to keep it a little shorter than last time. But since we're changing the topic a little bit here to how different types of people are suited to different trainings, using the examples of the persons we just learned about now, Ariya and Sadakani, and so forth, I think if we get the chance to take some time to receive the Dhamma we just went through today, we would be well ready and suited for another episode at a later time. So with that, let me just apply my bookmark here, close the book, and then we have gone a little further in the study of the Manual of Insight by the Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw. And so with that, I just want to say thank you a lot for taking the time and paying attention and listening to these Dhamma talks, and may you attain path knowledge and path fruition and nibbana by your own energy, effort, and investigation of these Dhammas. So by this truth, may there be peace. And once again, thank you so much for your attention. And if you are looking for related or relevant links, you can look below this video in the description, where you will find a link to this whole playlist with previous episode 1 and future episodes as well. So I will now leave you to your meditation, satipatthana, on the body, the feelings, and the thoughts, and these Dhammas that we have gone through today. So yeah, may there be peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering in this very life. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And as always, I'm just going to take a few moments of silence after the stream, for the stream to enter, so I don't cut anything off at the end of the stream. So a few moments of meditation, just a few moments, and we will be out of the live streaming session.